What's driving you to the success that you have right now?
I think I benefited a lot from my family. My parents were both in retail, which I think is brutal work. But we grew up, the work ethic they had was crazy. So that was just built into all of us as kids. Well, I think what draws me from there, and this is kind of a blessing and a curse for me, like I tend to think a lot in the future. And I'm always thinking about what it looks like and what I want. And it can be really optimistic as far as always thinking everything's gonna be good and give me a really clear goal. So that drives me quite a bit.
Welcome to the podcast. Nathan Newberry here, your host. Super pumped for you guys on this episode. I have Jeff Aronheim on the line here. He's going to talk about his story, and we're going to hear about how he does some amazing things with mortgage lending, how he builds a team, how he runs a tight ship with how he builds his business. He's a family man. He's been married for a long time, has multiple kids. We're going to hear his success story and really dive into that. But before we do, I want to give you a free training, something that's going to be helpful for everybody. Down below in the show notes, there is a training of how to build an online, business. Many people need to know how to really be able to market themselves well, get the proper leads and revenue. And most of the time people miss this. And this is where building a brand, building an audience is what I can help you with. So it's my free gift to you. Check that training down below. It's going to be super helpful for you. Jeff, I'm super excited to talk about your life and your story for our listeners here. But before we do, I ask everybody this question. What is high performance? What does that look like? What does that mean to you? What does that describe in your life of what you've seen?
To me, high performance is really just clarity of purpose. So knowing exactly what you want, knowing what that end post looks like and going to there. And then to me, high performance is sort of the day-to-day rituals and habits that you develop, I think is what makes the difference. So what time you get up, what you do first thing in the morning, how you build out your calendar, we call like a perfect week, where you literally design what that perfect week looks like and you're just executing on it every day. So there's a lot less thought into what am I doing next, as opposed to just stacking from one thing to the next.
Yeah, that's so important. And most of the time people miss that. Like they don't calibrate their calendar properly and they just miss it. Tell us a little bit about your success, Jeff. Like, how do you serve people? How do people know of you? Like, give us some insights there of what you do.
Sure. So again, I'm a residential mortgage lender, cross-country mortgage. It's one of the largest national retail mortgage lenders in the country. So I kind of run a business within a business. Just to give context for folks who have their own businesses, I originally got in the business in 2005. There's kind of a funny backstory on how my wife got in the business in 2000. My dad talked her into it. And then in 2005, I had an opportunity. I was an engineer in my former life. And an opportunity to either relocate to Chicago or just take a severance. And I just decided to join her. And I learned from her. And, we kind of built from there.
That's super cool, man. And
yeah.
What I love about high performers like you and I and many of the listeners here is we have a crazy origin story. I want to understand a little bit of like what's making you tick, what's wiring you for achievement. Because most often than not, people have, they look at the status quo and they're okay with it. Commission sales, roles, and jobs and entrepreneurs, they fascinate me because it really, there's a different personality all there that is different. It's the 1% of the 1%. Like, what's driving you to the success that you have right now? What awoken this beast, if you would? What was that line in the sand way back when? I think you hinted toward a few of those stories, but I'd love to hear and highlight some of that.
I think I benefited a lot from my family. So my parents were both in retail, which I think is brutal work. But we grew up, the work ethic they had was crazy. So that was just built into all of us as kids. Well, I think what draws me from there, and this is kind of a blessing and a curse for me, like I tend to think a lot in the future. And I'm always thinking about what it looks like and what I want. And it can be really optimistic as far as always thinking everything's going to be good and give me a really clear goal. So that drives me quite a bit. The part I have to be careful about is if I'm in the future too often, I can not be paying attention to what's going on around me today and in the moment. And that's really important when I have team members and a wife and kids, to make sure that I'm present as well. But I think just the future vision is sort of what keeps me going in my why. And then, I mean, part of me, I'm just one of those guys. I like to check off, like crush things out. I honestly just get satisfaction out of crushing things and getting them done.
Mm-hmm.
And then a huge driver for me is honestly just making people happy. Like, I'm huge on customer care. And when I can see people saying, thank you so much, or you really made a difference, it's just a huge driver for me.
Yeah. Now you have, you're jacked. Like if you're listening to this, like Jeff's a physique guy, like he's in fitness, he's had a trainer for 13 years. Like
Mhm.
what inspired you to really take your health really seriously? Because I mean,
Mhm.
tell us that story.
Yeah, that's kind of a fun story. So my trainer, his name is Jason Allen Robinson. His company's Jar Fit. If you see him online, like he's the real deal. 6'4", 260 pounds of pure muscle, and is a professional. And we actually met him at a restaurant where my wife walks up to him and says, "Excuse me." And this is this 4'9" Vietnamese girl with an accent. So you got to have the context here. But she's like, "Excuse me, like I'm a happily married woman, but do you happen to have a friend that, someone like you from one of my friends?" So she's basically trying to like find someone as good looking like Jason for one of her girlfriends. So we end up hitting it off and talk for a while. And it's probably 3-4 years later, I decided to start training with him. And that was about age 43, maybe. And when I started training, it was really just regular physical trainer stuff. But every now and then he would say, "Hey, you should do this physique competition. Like, I think you have good structure. I think you'd be good." And I was like, "No, you guys are all weird. Like you're just strange. You're shaving, you're spray tanning. Like you guys are bizarro, not interested." And he wouldn't, he was always friendly about it, but he would once in a while like, "Oh yeah, you'd be really good at this." And when you're plateauing in your workouts and you just don't know what to do.
Mm.
And he caught me in that moment one time when he's like, "Hey, you should do this." So I said, "Oh, what the, you know?" And I said, "Sure, I'll do it. I can do anything for 90 days, whatever you need me to do." So he was shocked that I did it. But this was back in 2015. It was the first time I did it, and I did the one show. It's like it was 3 to 4 months of very intense diet, workout, cardio, the whole deal. I mean, I had to get down. It's probably down to about 5% body fat for that one.
Wow.
And it's just one of those things that kind of set me off on the path where I would then every, I don't know, 10 months, a year maybe goes by where I feel like maybe I'm getting doughy again. I'm like, "Okay, Jason, it's time for another one." So I sort of jump in and out of these competitions just to stay in good shape.
Yeah. How has that affected you and your relationship with your wife? Because I think you've been married for 25 years. How many years?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
It'll be 25 years this June.
yeah, how do you balance all this, with working out, your
Yeah.
job, your family, your kids? Like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two answers. So for my wife, that was a challenge because that kind of endeavor is a very selfish endeavor. Like you're going into your own place to eat at the right time, the right food. Like it's a super selfish thing that you're doing, and you have to recognize it's going to be hard on everyone else who doesn't do that. And then I got to tell you guys, if you're eating enough protein and doing all this stuff, you are going to be gassy as all can be. So those two things were a big challenge, and it was usually 1 week before the competition where my wife would say, "Okay, I've had enough. We're going to go talk to our therapist." And it was like clockwork where she would do it. And it took her a few years and she started to get the hang of it, and I'm better at it. But, it was definitely a challenge in that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
For the work aspect, it was kind of the opposite. So what was happening was I was emanating just this energy. And, when you're feeling good, you're high energy, and it's just sort of rippling. It's almost like a pebble in the pond. And I can see people feeling about it. So it's affecting my team members. My clients feel it. And it's like I was in this coaching program for years, for 11 years in a row. And they had sort of who was the best student of the 6-month semester. And it seemed like it's really hard to win these. And it seemed like the times I won them were the times that I was training for the competition.
Mm. Mm.
So even though the competition was intense, for whatever reason, I was still fine cranking that and cranking the work too. And they kind of worked really synergistic. Like it's an energy thing.
Yeah. You're talking about transformations. I'm on my one. I'm on one right now, but I have young kids too, and so the balance of my calendar is like I have to take it. Like I have to wake up at 4 a.m. just to
Mhm.
fit it all in. Like, and so I had to restructure my calendar. Like, and it was different and it was challenging, and I had to build out some different disciplines that I'd never thought before. Like, what did have to happen, or you have to sacrifice or give up or have to readjust to make that a priority?
Yeah, it's different now. My kids are in college and we're empty nesters, so it's pretty easy now. But boy, when they're younger, it's a challenge. And we were very fortunate, honestly, and we had a nanny that we had for years. I mean, from the time my son was born until now. I mean, she's not doing it anymore, but she was with these kids for 18 years. We didn't even need to keep her as a nanny anymore. She's more like adopted grandma at this point.
Love that. Yeah.
But that was a huge thing for us because we were both working. And I just remember you just get through it
Hmm.
that time with the kids. I think we were fortunate. We didn't have these sporty kids where they were playing, you're traveling all over the state and doing all kinds of things. But yeah, in the beginning, it's hard to work out. Like there's no working out the first 4 years the kids are there.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to get the sleep and get your work done and keep things afloat.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Are are you in this hunt for just like knowledge and obsession with learning, or is that something that is new for you?
I don't know. Yeah, I'd say I have a growth mindset. And a lot of people say that, but when I say it, what I mean is people say they want to do something and grow, but the process actually sucks.
Yeah.
Like when you're in the middle, like doing these competitions, like it's not fun in the moment. You just grinding and it's a battle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you get through the other side of it that you just feel is when you can celebrate and have those moments there. So
Yeah. Let me ask you this question around your team. When you talked
mhm,
about growth before the podcast here, you had talked about, you were an individual person and then you transitioned to building teams. And that was a whole
yeah,
nother skill of things that you had to transition with learning. And I kind of categorize it as an independent person, you have to learn a few different things. You have to learn how to sell, you have to know how to market, you have to know how to do the fulfillment, but you also need to know how to lead teams, set up automations and systems, right? And I think people inherently are like, okay, if I could figure out how to, or if they work for a company that has the fulfillment down, really it's like I just need to figure out how to do sales and marketing. But then there's a whole nother skill set with doing systems, automations, and running teams. Like talk about that in your
yeah.
experience with running and building your teams there.
Yeah. So when I first got in the business, my wife was in the business already and I joined her and it was just the two of us. And we each did our own clients. We kept separate. And, the first thing we did, and just to give context, so like my background is I was an engineer in my former life. I learned how to be a really good individual performer, deliver great work, make my bosses happy, like I really understand what was important to them and deliver that. And I kind of called it this sleep well at night factor. Like
Mm.
they just know I took care of it. And that worked really well for me in learning the new business, learning how to sell, um, learning the guidelines, learning the programs, like all of that was just up to me to do. And, what we started with was just learning that. And then we focused on building systems before we hired people just to try to streamline and automate as much as we can so we can be more efficient. And that was stuff well within my wheelhouse. But boy, Nathan, when it came time to hire people, like I was a disaster.
Mm.
I mean, everything I learned in engineering school and everything up to date was to be an an individual performer, and had nothing to do with how to lead people and manage people. And it was a struggle. I hired the wrong people. I was a terrible leader. We went through staff all the time. They didn't like working for me. So it was honestly easily a 10-15 year process to really start to develop those skills with a lot of coaching, a lot of support and some pretty difficult conversations that, I had to just kind of suck it up and
Hmm.
sort of take accountability.
Yeah.
So that's been sort of the biggest growth, is just learning how to really work with people and bring them along and give them the opportunity to grow as well.
Let me ask you this too, because you had to grow into this, even in the body competitions of stuff. Is when you get later in life, there's, and I guess every aspect of it, everybody's seeking comfort, right? And then you get to a stride in your life where you like things are just coasting, right? And then there's like these moments where it's like, hey, I can cruise, and or I can look for painful things. And I think that is, like we talked about before, it's like the hard things are also the best things, but it's also difficult and it's painful. It's like those growth pains, right? And it's like
Uh-huh.
the first time you're lifting weights in the gym, you feel like trash and you're like, why are people doing this? But then as you do it more often, you don't feel as like, you get accustomed to the little discomfort of soreness, but then it just becomes a natural part of things, and then you love it because then it's just like that good pain that you want, you know. And then like
Yeah.
hiring is a similar thing too, where it's like it's so difficult and hard because you're taking up more time than, you know, you're training people, and then it's a growing pain. But most of the time people do not, they don't, they hit a ceiling of like comfort and they never go past it. Talk
Yeah.
about like you leaning into that a little bit with some of the things that you've been able to do and what you're doing now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess first off, when I think of what you're saying, it reminds me of an analogy I heard, like brushing your teeth. So like when you're a kid, your mama has to force you to brush your
Yeah,
teeth.
yeah, good point.
You'll never do it. And then you eventually come to the point where you realize mom's not going to stop. So I'm just going to do it because she's just going to stay on me. And then eventually you kind of just get into the habit of it. And then later in life, like it's just gross and weird if you don't brush your teeth.
Yeah.
So like that's the process of sort of developing the habits. But as I think about what you just talked about, like to me, the grit is
Mm.
sort of that word that comes to mind, is just continuing through even when things stink, because you keep your vision on that endpoint of why you're doing it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, going back to our growth mindset, the growth part of things is it's like sometimes there's areas that we can always grow in, and we need to find mentorships, mentors, advisors, other peers around you to really kind of help you point out some of those blind spots because we all have them. And I started realizing this, and I don't know if you do this as well, but I realized, hey, for me to grow at the growth that I probably should and probably want to achieve the sort of things, it requires the people to see through. And so I invest heavily in mentorship and in books and in seminars and conferences and other people around me, my peer group and my thing, just
Mm-hmm.
because I know if I can get in those atmospheres of being clear on that growth, it allows me to grow at such a substantial way than me trying to just grind it out on my own, hoping and praying, you know. And the first time I hired people, it was horrible, you know, and then managing people was horrible. And then you start getting to used to it, like brush your teeth, like you're saying, but then it gets to a point where it's like, now I'm seeing it. Now I'm seeing the growth, the compounding effect of, you know, for instance, of like, I don't have to edit or manage these podcasts anymore. I just
Yeah.
built the systems, I built the teams, and it just starts evolving over time. And the same thing with, you know, production of mortgage lending and those sort of things. I can only imagine it, where it's like at the beginning it was horrible, like you're saying, but now it's like the compounding effect of like, hey, now I can see more, I can breathe more, I can accomplish more than ever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's like, if you're listening here on the podcast, like think openly to be growth minded and always be endeavoring to get people around you that's going to help you push you toward being better. Have you found that it's amazing that your wife is supportive of your growth, but have you found some roadblocks sometimes within either your peer circle or your company, or your spouse, that's limiting that growth or things that you want to do that you've encountered?
Not much. I've been
Okay.
pretty fortunate. Now and then your wife will check you on expenses and you want to go big and invest. But she's supported me. And I mean, I've had a body coach for years. We have our mental coach that we've had for years, someone we hired in 2006, just to make sure us working together wasn't going to destroy the marriage. And
Mm,
we still use them
that's smart.
today. I've had a business coach for the last 12 plus years now. Like if you don't have these coaches, like you're not going to go to the next level. And then one of the best things that I saw, like this is back in 2012, and I'm in the mortgage industry, and I went to this coaching summit designed for lenders and realtors. And the coaching was amazing, but one of the most crazy things that happened was I went in there thinking, oh man, if I can just do 12 loans a month, that would be amazing. Mm. And then I get there and I'm meeting these people that are closing 50 loans a month. And all of a sudden I'm like, my vision went from here to here. And you're like, well, if this person can do it and they seem like a normal guy like me, I can figure this out.
Right.
So being around those people who are operating at the highest levels is really important.
Yep. Yep. It grows in levels. Like you're so right. So right, Jeff. Mm-hmm. I've really loved our conversation around growth mindset and what you've been doing with your team and your family and what you're doing with, body transformation and your family. Like, but how could people follow you in this journey, or if they need some residential connections all over the place, you can help serve them? How can they find you and follow you further?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, we have an Instagram account, Jeff Aronheim. We have our website. Again, it's just teamaronheim.com or aronheim.com. Those will all take you there. If you Google my name, it's all going to pop up. But yeah, we're pretty active on the social. We're licensed we can lend pretty much throughout all of the U.S. So geographically, we're able to lend anywhere. And, we just love having conversations with folks about whatever. Like, I'm happy to share all my pains and all my mistakes that I made if I can help you avoid one. And I'm certainly happy to share what we do in the lending world with helping people to build real wealth in real estate over time.
Well, right on. I'll put all those down in the show notes. Go check out and follow Jeff. Again, if you're a leader that's wanting to build an online presence and get more leads and revenue, I can help you out. Check that free training I gave you guys down in the show notes as well. And we will see you on the next episode.